Sometimes you notice something strange about yourself. You can sit quietly for long periods without reaching for a screen. You can tolerate boredom in a way younger people struggle with. And when things go wrong, you don't panic immediately. You pause, you think, you improvise. But you may have also wondered something else. Why do you sometimes feel slightly out of sync with the modern world? Why do constant notifications feel exhausting instead of exciting? And why does silence feel comfortable to you when everyone else seems to fear it? The answer might not be personality. It might be something deeper, something shaped decades ago, before smartphones, before algorithms, before the internet learned how to occupy every second of human attention. And strangely, the brain that developed during that time may carry a few rare psychological advantages today. But to understand why, we first need to look at what growing up in the 1970s actually did to the mind. If you grew up in the 1970s, your childhood probably contained something modern childhoods rarely experience: large stretches of unstructured time, afternoons where nothing was scheduled, evenings where entertainment meant figuring something out yourself. You played outside until it got dark. You waited days or weeks for things. A TV show aired once. If you missed it, it was gone. Phone calls happened in one room of the house, with everyone else listening nearby. Information moved slowly, and boredom was normal. Not a problem to solve, just part of life. At the time, it didn't feel special. It felt ordinary. But from a psychological perspective, something very important was happening inside your brain during those years. Your mind was learning how to operate without constant stimulation. Today, most people grow up in what psychologists call a high dopamine environment. Every scroll, every notification, every short video, tiny rewards delivered constantly. The brain adapts to this by expecting stimulation all the time. But your brain developed in the opposite condition: low stimulation, slow rewards. And that difference quietly shaped several cognitive traits that are becoming increasingly rare. But here's the strange part. Some of those traits might also be the reason you occasionally feel misunderstood in modern culture, because the same psychological patterns that create resilience can also create a sense of distance. To understand why, we need to look at how the brain adapts to its environment. First, something important. If you sometimes feel slower, quieter, or less reactive than people around you, that does not mean your mind is outdated. In psychology, the brain is described as a prediction machine. It constantly learns patterns from its environment and builds strategies to survive within them. Your childhood environment taught your brain three core lessons. Resources are limited. Waiting is normal. Entertainment must sometimes be created, not consumed. These lessons shaped your attention system, your emotional regulation, and even your tolerance for uncertainty. So what might feel like being out of step today is often actually the result of adaptive brain training that happened decades ago. In other words, you are not wired wrong. You were wired for a different environment. And some of those adaptations are quietly becoming psychological superpowers. But they come from a specific mechanism inside the brain. Let's imagine the brain as a reward thermostat. A thermostat adjusts temperature based on the environment. If the room is constantly hot, the thermostat recalibrates. If the room is cool, it recalibrates again. The brain's dopamine system works in a similar way. Dopamine is often misunderstood as the pleasure chemical, but neuroscientists describe it more accurately as the motivation signal. It tells the brain, this is worth pursuing. When dopamine rewards happen constantly, like they do today, the brain raises its baseline expectations. Small rewards stop feeling satisfying. This is called dopamine adaptation. But in the 1970s, rewards arrived slowly. You waited for music on the radio. You saved money for something you wanted. You experienced longer gaps between stimulation. This created a different calibration in the reward system. Your brain learned to generate engagement internally instead of constantly expecting it from outside sources. Another way to picture this is a simple mental model: the self-starting engine. Some minds operate like push-start engines. They need an external spark to get going. Other minds function more like self-starting engines. They can begin thinking, imagining, or problem-solving without external input. Low-stimulation childhoods often train this internal ignition system, which leads to several rare psychological traits that researchers now associate with creativity, resilience, and deep thinking. Let's look at a few of them. These are not things you need to learn, they are patterns you may already carry. The key is recognizing and using them intentionally. 1. The boredom to curiosity shift. What to notice? You may tolerate boredom longer than most people. Instead of panicking when nothing is happening, your mind eventually starts exploring ideas. Why this happens in the brain? Research in cognitive psychology shows that boredom activates the default mode network, a brain system linked to imagination and reflection. People who grew up without constant stimulation often developed stronger tolerance for this state. Instead of escaping boredom immediately, their minds wander productively. Real-life example. You sit in a waiting room with nothing to do. Someone else immediately pulls out their phone. But you start observing small details around you. Your thoughts drift into memories, plans, or ideas. That wandering isn't wasted time, it's the brain's creative network switching on. And that ability is becoming rare. 2. Delayed gratification. What to do? When something takes time, you may feel uncomfortable, but not overwhelmed. You naturally wait. Why it works in the brain? Psychologist Walter Mischel's famous marshmallow experiment showed that children who could delay gratification often developed stronger executive control in the prefrontal cortex. Waiting strengthens the brain's future-oriented thinking systems. If you grew up saving, waiting, or planning without instant rewards, your brain practiced this skill thousands of times. Real-life example. You work toward a long-term project. Weeks pass before visible results appear. Many people lose motivation, but you keep going because your brain is familiar with slow reward cycles. All of these traits come from the same psychological foundation, a brain trained in low-stimulation environments. Think of your mind like a deep lake. Modern attention culture often creates shallow ponds, constantly disturbed by small ripples. But deeper water behaves differently. It moves slower. It holds more beneath the surface, and when it becomes still, you can see much further down. The boredom tolerance, the patience, the improvisation, the comfort with silence, they are not random personality quirks. They are signs of a mind trained to operate without constant external input, and in a world increasingly designed to capture attention, that ability is quietly becoming rare. 7. Quiet, empowering close. You might never have thought of your childhood this way. It probably just felt normal, maybe even ordinary. But environments shape brains, and the slower world you grew up in left certain cognitive muscles stronger. The challenge today is not changing who you are, it's remembering that some of the traits you carry, patience, reflection, independent thinking, are not weaknesses in a fast world. They are anchors. And sometimes the people who feel slightly out of step with modern noise are the ones still capable of hearing something deeper, the kind of quiet thinking the world rarely gives itself time to do anymore. And that quiet might be one of the rarest strengths a mind can have today.